First of all, your ears and listening judgment is the ultimate decision you shall depend on to pick the right speakers for your music enjoyment. Every speakers have their sound signature, and every person has their own preference or taste on the sound. This is why audition in dealer's place or showroom is important to compare the speakers. But as we know, how the speakers sound in the showroom or even in your friend's house could be dramatically different when you bring the speakers back to your own listening room at home. Why? This is what you will learn from this video series. Traditionally, we use the speaker's frequency response curve to judge how good the speaker's performance will be. We assume the flatter frequency response is, the better sound for the speakers will be. But in reality, this is not necessarily true, as some speakers attracted more customers without good frequency response curve, so some audiophile have some doubt if flat frequency response is a good indicator for good sound. Let's take a closer look on the traditional frequency response curve. It is typically measured on axis to the tweeter level in 50 inches or 1 meter right in front of the tweeter. This is assuming the listener's ear will be at the same height as the speaker's tweeter level. Obviously, this assumption may not be correct, depends on the speaker size or its tweeter height when you place them in your listening room. Let's look at this Vienna Acoustics Mahler speakers as one example. It is about 51 inches tall, and its tweeter is about 48 inches from the ground. When Stereophile magazine measured the on-axis at the tweeter level, its frequency response curve looks ugly, with a large dip between 3 and 4 kHz area. This is due to the speaker crossover transition between its mid-range woofer and the tweeter, along with their physical arrangement. You will see similar effect on some other speakers around their crossover transition frequency area. Now let's look at how our listening position will be. Assuming we are sitting about 8 or 9 feet away, as showed on this drawing, with a recliner chair, then the listener ear height is about 32 or 39 inches versus the tweeter height of 48 inches, so the effective listening angle from the tweeter will be about 8 or 5 degrees below the tweeter level respectively, or somewhere in between the tweeter and the mid-range woofer level, if you tried to do the measurement at about 50 inches from the speaker, as Stereophile did. Here is the frequency response curve from Stereophile magazine, measured at the height of upper mid-range woofer, below the tweeter, so you can see, it is much flatter than it was measured at tweeter height level. This is why we shall try to understand the vertical response curve, to confirm how the speakers could behave in your listening position. Here is the Vienna Acoustics Mahler showing flatter curves, or frequency responses when measured below the tweeter level, between 5 and 15 degrees lower, as showed on the 3 front curves. This gives some explanation why some ugly measured speakers could sound better from one perspective. The more importance is actually the horizontal response for the speakers, as your listening room reflection will have major impact for the sound you are experiencing. Let's look at how the Vienna Acoustics Mahler's measurement looks like. Wow, this is a very ugly chart at the first look. But let's pay more attention for how this plot is done by Stereophile magazine. It is a normalized plot, based on the tweeter level as the reference, and is showed as 0 degree, in the center, from back to front as the axis on the right of the plot. Since we have seen there was a major dip, in between 3 and 4 kHz at its tweeter level, when the measuring microphone is moving from left to right, off-axis for this plot, as showed from the back to front, as indicated on the right side of the chart, we can't see major peaks on the response. In reality, these peaks are much flatter, as off-axis performance, when you consider the major dip for the on-axis, as the reference. Here is a different measurement done by the Poland's Polish audio magazine for Vienna Acoustics Mahler speakers. This is most likely measured below tweeter level, so it showed much flatter responses. The first line on the top is measured at 0 degree on axis, the middle curve is for 15 degrees off axis, while the bottom curve is 30 degrees off axis. Off axis means measured from left or right of the speaker. Since the speaker has symmetrical design, so its left or right off axis behavior will be the same. If you have an asymmetrical speaker design, then you will have to pay more attention, as its left or right response curves will not be the same. So what is the impact for these horizontal response in your listening room? These off-axis sound wave will be broadcasted to hit your sidewall of the listening room and be reflected to your ears as the first reflection sound. These reflected sound will be combined with the direct sound that come directly from the on-axis speaker sound wave to form the sound stage and sound imaging that the audiophile is chasing for. Reflection is actually important to help the timbre and spaciousness to be more musical for your music enjoyment. Now we have seen how critical the off-axis response and the tweeter level will affect the actual sound in your listening room, as well as how to read the speaker's measurement correctly, since they might be measured in different reference level or different measuring method. This is why the audio industry is trying to standardize for the speaker's measurements in the recent years, with the new spinorama methodology, as defined in ANSI spec. We will review these more in future episodes of this video series. Thanks for Stereophile magazine, and especially John Atkinson, who has been doing this consistent speakers measurements in last few decades, so we have tons of speakers data to do apple-to-apple comparison. You can also find many speakers measurements from other places, such as the Poland's Polish Audio magazine online version that also has long history. We just need to know how to read them correctly when we try to compare the speakers